From the kitchen of the cabin, it's the 5 Games for Doomsday review. Artline. We all want to belong to something. Most of us, anyway. There are few genuine anchorites in the world, although there are some miserable bastards. We want to belong. Whether we be the most tediously outgoing or frustratingly introverted people, there is a part of our cerebellum that pushes us towards groups. We want to feel like we belong and that we have ownership of at least one aspect of ourselves. Of course, it then becomes a problem when we push this single aspect to the fore and eclipse every other facet of our personality, because then we start to believe that others are as one-dimensional as we see ourselves, and then we start to shout at them on Twitter. Belonging shouldn't mean subsuming everything to one idea. But then, how will we harvest those little red hearts? This is what fandom is, the simultaneous belonging to and ownership of a thing. We project our hopes into this thing, and it feels like it's beholden to us in some way. Then some people grab SLRs and rant into the lens when it deviates slightly from what they think it should be. There are calls for recuts and boycotts, and considering the very limited time all of us have on the planet, we could more profitably get off YouTube and hug our loved ones before they're gone. But that would mean actual face-to-face engagement, and who wants to trouble themselves with that? Ownership, though, is not always a negative thing. It's what imbues us with passion, and it is essential for great gaming. When the rules of a game sublime away, and we're able to fully engage and fully own a gaming experience, this is memorable. The experience becomes the property of our group and ourselves. We get that wonderfully wrong impression that the designer concocted the rules just for us. We begin to feel like Richard Spencer feels when he listens to a Morrissey tune. There are some games that bake the notion of group ownership into the rules. They ask you to add your own content to the game, and in this way stamp your group's identity onto your experience. Codenames does this, Dixit does this, and Artline from Hobby World does this. In Artline, players take on the roles of gallery curators, collecting works of art for specially themed exhibitions. Players start with a handful of cards depicting famous works of art. Being a Hobby World game, there are plenty of obscure czarist generals to gaze at. These cards are placed into a row or column, and when it's placed, the player takes a facet of that picture. It could be horses or something more esoteric like a sense of ennui, and each subsequent card played into that row or column must share that characteristic. In this, you must be prepared to stretch definitions and defend your interpretations to other players. You then draw a card. If you manage to place a card at an intersection fulfilling 2 criteria, you don't have to draw a card at the end of your turn, and the first player to run out of cards wins. The real beauty of this game is that it moulds itself to every group that plays it. Your exhibitions can be prosaic or fanciful. You can play it as a casual distraction, a chance to look at beautiful pictures, or as a game of vicious exactitude, and it works in both modes. The fun really emerges, though, in tenuous connections. When your painting barely connects to the requirement, then you turn into an advocate desperate to convince the court. There are choices in the game, too. What to place and what aspect to focus on can have ramifications for the rest of the game. There is a fragility to the game, though, and the introduction of those who consider above-table interaction beneath them could drag the experience down. Just wait for them to go home, though, and this game is a great experience. Artline is the perfect game to start or end an evening. The rules aren't ponderous, and there is enough of a game there to make you think, and enough possibility for good-humoured disagreement that the right group could really take this game to their hearts. A great game experience is feeling like you've taken the game from the designer and made it your own, and Artline encourages this, and this is what makes the game worthwhile. Thank you for listening, and it is the contributions of my patrons that has made this review possible. You can become one too at patreon.com/5G4D.